process costing. Next week, it's about the next week we're together is about standard cost. And if you notice the sequence of the chapters assigned, look in the syllabus, it's not 20, 21, and 22 on purpose. The next topic that we've chosen to cover connects to these so well that I wanted you to be aware and know that material. Last week, about this time, I was encouraging you to learn last week. And I reviewed some of the quizzes this morning that had been graded over the weekend. And frankly, we didn't do as well on the quizzes as I hoped. Obviously, there's some good individual efforts, but there's a whole lot of red ink on those quizzes. And I would like to encourage you to spend a little bit of time early this week making sure you understand last week. It's the flow of costs through the accounts. It's the journal entries that you should have taken away from that. And if you don't know those yet, there's still time to do it. But master them now so that you can forget something over the holiday. You will. And you won't have to relearn everything. If you don't, you're on the brink of having to return from the holiday and learn 3 chapters all at once. Let's learn them when they should be learned. I'd like for you to be able to focus on process cost accounting this week. Let me give you a little overview of what we're going to talk about. As I started last Monday, I'd like to talk about the choice that you have. Why do some industries use process? Why do some use job order? We covered it last time. You know more than you did a week ago. We should talk about it again. There are lots of things that are the same. That's the reason I just encouraged you to learn more about last week. All those things are still the same. The account titles are the same. Using a predetermined overhead factory rate is the same. There are a few things that are different. Very few things that are different. And we'd like to talk about those too. Our objective is to be able to find the cost of the product that we produce. We must allocate those costs in process cost accounting. The allocation is based on this concept called equivalent units of production. And it's a huge deal. At least 3 times today, I will warn you that if you miss equivalent units of production, you miss everything else. We have never experienced a snowball effect like we will experience this week. If you miss this, you miss the next thing, which causes you to miss the next thing, and you get the final answer wrong. We have to understand equivalent units of production. I want to take about 45 seconds and a few minutes to contrast the way we used to do it with the way we're doing it in the book. For years, we've done FIFO. And in this book, we're doing the weighted average method. They're a little different, and they get a little bit different answers. I like to talk about it. At the end of the hour, I want to work an exercise to you to show you how to implement the steps that we're going to talk about today. This one's very predictable. The challenge the authors have is how many different ways can we write the problem, so you have to look for the facts. Once you find the facts, the things that we do, the calculations that we make are very, very predictable. The contrast I'd like to draw is between the comparison, a better word, would be between this and the cash flow chapter. Why did you get good at the cash flow chapter? I think it's because you did so many of them. We did them, and we did them, and we did them, and you finally caught on and saw that all of them were going to be that way. Well, these steps are the same in every one of the problems we do. The authors will wiggle them around a little bit and try to challenge you or hide them, but we're going to find those steps to be the same every time. I repeat, our goal is to find the cost of the goods that we finished so that we can move them on to the next stage of production, and prove it by finding the cost of the goods that we didn't finish. Those are our objectives. We're going to spend time accomplishing those 2 things today and all week long. Let's talk about the contrast between job order and process. The same way we started last week. This one's a little too wordy. I need to say it, but if I don't spend enough time and for you to write it all down, don't get real frustrated with me. I've got some other good illustrations to contrast the two. In job order, we produce different products. And the cost we incur in producing those are traceable to those particular jobs on which we work. Contrasted with process costing, in which we produce a whole lot of units that are just alike and are difficult or impossible to distinguish one from another. That's the crux of the issue. That's the whole thing. In job order, we can identify the costs and separate them by the job on which we work. In process, we typically work on them in departments. And again, maybe 3 times today, I'm going to talk about this departmental reference. Sometimes we think of moving the goods from raw materials to work in process and right on to finished goods right then. Maybe it takes more than one process to convert a raw material into a finished product. Maybe it goes from raw materials to assembly, and then it goes from assembly into welding, and from welding into sanding, and then from sanding into finished goods. Did you understand what I just said? Yes. So maybe it takes us more than one process to finish the goods. We might see that this week. When we've produced products, and if it's valuable and we want to know the unit amount for comparisons purposes, for evaluation purposes, for decision-making purposes, we would take the cost of that job, divide by the number of units we produce. That ought to bring a great big duh. Everybody can figure that out. Here's the one that's a little too long and wordy, and it's the last one, and I click the screen and you get frustrated and look over at your neighbor's paper. We're going to find the unit cost in process costing. We're going to divide the cost that we incur by the number of units we produce and know those unit costs and be able to watch them monthly and annually and try to reward good behavior and correct things that we have control over when costs seem to be not what we should expect them to be. So those are some of the differences in job order. Let's talk about it another way. These are illustrations I used in lecture last Monday, as I recall. The contrast between someone going into a print shop and ordering graduation announcements or invoices or wedding invitations or business cards or all the kinds of things we would walk up to the counter and order, where it's going to have our phone number printed on it, the name of our company on it, our email address, those kinds of things. It's going to be produced to our specifications compared to the publisher of the accounting textbook that's going to produce thousands and thousands and thousands of them that are just alike. Both printing applications, but distinctly different in the way the cost system would work to accumulate and report the information. I use the example of an auto mechanic, who would be a good example of job order, even though it's not manufacturing, where they kept the cost of the different jobs differently so that we knew the parts and the labor and added an overhead factor to know how much to charge for this. Compared with an automobile manufacturer, it seems to me that many of these automobiles are the same as they go down the assembly line. We're probably using process costing until they become unique and different right at the very end because of the features that they choose to put on one automobile over another. That may be a kind of hybrid between process and job order, with process being the more dominant of the two in that case. And finally, we talked about going shopping for some furniture. We might be able to buy something right off the showroom floor that was mass-produced and accounted for from a furniture manufacturer. But on the other hand, in one of those stores, we might be able to pick out our own fabric and specify we'd like a sofa built to these specifications, arms this high, this particular kind of pillow back, or whatever it is. So this would be job order to the customer's specifications. One more attempt at this, at trying to get you to see job order and process distinctions so that you could buy into it. I think a residential construction contractor who's building more than one house in the city, maybe on the